At 6:41 on December 7, 1944, Corporal Samuel Dutton lies motionless inside the burned shell of a Wehrmacht supply wagon in the Hürtgen Forest. The wagon is a carcass of oak planks and warped iron, blackened by a fire that burned hot and fast weeks earlier. Its right wheel is collapsed inward, spokes fused into a single twisted mass. The left side panel is missing entirely, blown away by artillery, leaving a ribcage of charred beams. Dutton is wedged beneath the axle line, his shoulders pressed into frozen mud, his spine aligned with a shallow rut worn by hooves and retreating boots. The temperature is 31 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that breath fogs and freezes, warm enough that snowmelt drips steadily from pine needles, tapping against the wagon's iron rim with the irregular rhythm of a metronome losing time. Dutton has been here for 3 hours and 12 minutes. He does not move. 9 German riflemen advance through the trees, spread in a staggered file across roughly 60 yards of frontage. Their boots compress frost into the loam with a dull, dampened crunch. Their breath hangs white and low. They are not rushing. Men who rush in the Hürtgen Forest do not last long. 2 of them matter more than the others. The first carries field glasses slung tight to his chest, lenses capped with leather. The second wears a wire spool at his hip, the dull gray cable looped carefully to avoid snagging brush. A folded map case rests against his thigh, its edge chalked with white grease pencil markings. Mortar spotters. If they finish their work, the forest will answer with steel. Dutton's rifle lies across his forearms, barrel resting on a scrap of burlap stretched over ash-blackened wood. It is not regulation. Anyone with eyes can see that. The stock has been slimmed and rebedded by hand, the cheek weld shaved down to bare wood. The bolt has been polished beyond ordnance specifications, tolerances tightened in a way the manuals forbid. The trigger breaks lighter than a loud, clean, sudden, without creep. Men laughed when they saw it, officers frowned. Someone once told him, half joking, half afraid, that thing's going to jam when it counts. Dutton did not answer then. He does not answer now. The nearest German is 68 yards away, partially obscured by a fallen spruce. The farthest is 141 yards, moving laterally through a stand of young firs where visibility collapses and opens with every step. Wind comes quartering left to right at 6 to 8 miles per hour, irregular, eddying through the trunks. Visibility fluctuates between 40 and 90 yards, depending on the fog's patience. Inside the wagon, the smells are layered and heavy. Wet ash, old horse leather soaked with rot, cold gun oil, sharp and metallic. Beneath it all, the faint copper tang of rusted iron warmed by Dutton's body heat and then cooled again. His left foot is numb past the ankle. He stopped trying to feel it an hour ago. His right cheek is welded to frozen steel, skin stuck where moisture touched metal and surrendered. He breathes through his nose, slow and shallow, counting the seconds between exhalations. Condensation gathers on the wagon's interior roof and freezes, tiny beads of ice forming and dropping without sound. Somewhere far off 5 or 6 kilometers by his estimation, artillery thumps. Not for him, not yet. A raven lifts from a branch overhead, wings snapping the air once before silence returns. The German with the wire spool kneels. He sets his pack down carefully, deliberate as a man handling glass. The map case opens. A compass appears in his gloved hand, its needle wobbling before settling. He aligns it with the grease pencil marks, adjusts by degrees measured in lives. If the coordinates go out, the American infantry company dug in along the forest road, approximately 140 men, will have 10 to 15 minutes before the first rounds arrive. Mortars first. Then heavier pieces walking in. Casualties will run 35 to 50% before anyone can move. Dutton exhales. He feels the familiar pressure of the stock against his collarbone. The faint, intimate resistance of the trigger slack coming up beneath his finger. The rifle is steady. It always is. Not because it is perfect, but because he made it that way, nights after shift, years before this forest ever had a name to him. A boot scuffs. One of the riflemen turns his head, listening. Dutton does not rush. He has learned that rushing costs more than it saves. The wagon creaks softly as the iron cools. Somewhere, water drops again. Time narrows to inches and seconds. The spotter bends closer to the map. Dutton's finger takes up the last fraction of pressure. The forest seems to hold its breath. In the next 40 minutes, 1 corporal, 1 illegal rifle tune, and a burned-out wagon will prevent a bombardment that never appears in any official report. Samuel Elijah Dutton was born on March 3, 1918, in a 2-story clapboard house south of the tracks in Toledo. The neighborhood sat downwind of the Maumee River and upwind of the mills. On damp mornings, the air carried the mixed scent of coal smoke and lake water. On cold ones, metal shrank and doors stuck in their frames. His father, Elijah Dutton, worked the yards as a brakeman for the Lake Shore and Michigan Southern Line until August 1926, when a slipped coupling crushed his left leg below the knee. The injury paid out just enough to keep food on the table and bitterness in the house. His mother, Ruth, took seasonal work wherever hands were needed, laundries in winter, canneries in summer, coming home with raw knuckles and the smell of bleach ground into her clothes. Samuel learned early that things broke. More importantly, he learned that broken things were expected to be fixed. By age 10, he could strip and reassemble a cast iron pump without losing a washer. By 12, he understood that wood warped when cut wrong and steel complained when overheated. His first rifle was a hand-me-down, .22 with a cracked stock and a rear sight that never quite held zero. He learned to compensate without complaining, shooting squirrels along the riverbanks at distances he measured by pacing them off afterward. Precision was not taught, it was required. The Depression closed the door on schooling early. Samuel left high school at 16, not in anger but with resignation. In 1934, he took an apprenticeship at Midwest Gear and Axle Works, a low brick complex that rattled day and night with the sound of stamping presses and lathes. His job title was tool and die machinist, though the men on the floor called it simply keeping the line honest. The shifts ran 10 to 12 hours, 6 days a week. Steel came in cold and left warm. Samuel learned to read tolerances by feel, running his thumb across machined edges, listening for the faint whistle that meant two surfaces were fighting each other. He learned to measure down to 1/1000th of an inch with a micrometer whose jaws closed like a promise. Heat treating was judged by color, straw, purple, blue, and by smell, a sharp tang that told you when steel was about to betray you. For 7 years he worked that way, no shortcuts, no wasted motion. When parts failed, he wanted to know why. After hours, he hunted and shot, not competitively, quietly. He cleaned his rifle longer than most men thought necessary, then took it apart again to see what else could be improved. He polished feed ramps by hand, adjusted springs by fractions, learned how oil thickened in the cold and dust turned grease into paste. He never spoke about it. There was no audience for such things. On December 7, 1941, the factory radio crackled with news of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The presses fell silent for 17 seconds, a pause long enough for men to look at one another and understand that their lives had been remeasured. Someone swore softly, someone else crossed himself. Samuel wiped his hands on a rag and went back to work. He finished the shift, then he went home and told his mother he would be leaving. He enlisted on January 4, 1942, infantry replacement. The paperwork was efficient and impersonal. He was assigned a serial number, issued a uniform that did not quite fit, and shipped south to Fort Benning, Georgia, where red clay stained everything it touched. Basic training taught him what the Army valued: order, uniformity, acceptable margins of error. He scored consistently above company average in marksmanship, not because he shot faster, but because he missed less. Instructors noticed that he cleaned his weapon longer than prescribed and adjusted small things they considered inconsequential. One sergeant warned him, not unkindly, that the rifle is built smarter than you are. Samuel nodded and said nothing. By the time he joined his regiment, the nickname Hawk had already begun to circulate. It came from the range, from the way he seemed to watch targets longer than necessary before firing. He did not encourage it, he did not discourage it either. Within weeks, men began bringing him rifles that failed to feed or extract reliably. He fixed them without comment and handed them back. Officers were less receptive. A platoon lieutenant once dismissed his concerns about cold weather performance as civilian habits. The word stuck, civilian, as if the war had invented friction or cold or steel. In early 1944, the unit crossed the Atlantic under gray skies and heavier seas. The decks were slick with salt and spray. Training continued in England, along with renewed pressure to standardize equipment and behavior. Samuel complied outwardly. Inwardly, he watched men die from small failures that doctrine accepted as inevitable. By the time they moved east toward Germany, the forests closed in. The Hürtgen Forest waited dense, wet, and indifferent. Samuel walked into it knowing one thing with certainty: this terrain would punish anything built for averages. By late November 1944, the war in the Hürtgen Forest has settled into a pattern that no manual prepared men for. Doctrine assumes mobility, the forest denies it. Doctrine assumes visibility, the trees swallow it. Doctrine assumes weapons will function within broad tolerances. The forest narrows those tolerances to nothing. Humidity hangs between 85 and 92% on most days. Moisture seeps into everything: canvas, leather, paper, steel. Mud is not mud alone, but mud mixed with pulverized pine needles, acidic and fine as grit. Temperatures swing violently, dropping to 18 degrees Fahrenheit at night, then climbing above freezing by mid-morning. Metal contracts, oil thickens, carbon fouling cakes faster than it can be cleaned. Rifles begin to hesitate. At first it is dismissed as neglect. Men are told to clean more thoroughly, lubricate less, lubricate differently. Orders contradict one another within days. Bolts move sluggishly when cold. Extractors lose purchase when fouled. Feeding issues appear not every time, but often enough to matter. Command categorizes it as friction, acceptable loss. The first death that stays with Dutton happens on November 19, during a probe along a logging cut near Hill 400. Private First Class Edward Mallory, 19 years old, from Scranton, moves forward through fog so thick it beads on his eyelashes. Contact comes at under 40 yards. Mallory fires once. On the second shot, his bolt fails to close. He works it by instinct, muscle memory overriding thought. The rifle does not answer. A German rifle cracks. Mallory drops without a sound. The engagement lasts less than 2 minutes. His rifle, later inspected, is clean. The second comes a week later, during a withdrawal under intermittent mortar fire. Technician 5th grade Leonard Cross, 27, from Milwaukee, is covering the rear when his rifle fails to extract a spent casing. He cannot clear it under fire. He tries to fall back with a dead weight in his hands. Shrapnel finds him in the open. The casing is still lodged when Dutton retrieves the weapon. The third is quieter. Private Joseph Alvarez, 21, from El Paso, wakes before dawn to stand watch. His rifle bolt is frozen partially open, moisture having condensed overnight and locked it in place. He works it free eventually, but the delay costs him. A sniper round arrives before he can shoulder the weapon properly. None of these men are careless. None are inexperienced. They die because steel behaves the way steel always has, and doctrine refuses to notice. The crystallizing moment comes on November 28, during a night patrol meant to identify German mortar positions. The patrol is small, moving slow. The Germans respond faster than expected. Flares go up. Mortars follow within minutes, walking their fire with practiced efficiency. A man Dutton trusts, one who cleans his rifle meticulously, who follows every instruction, is hit while trying to return fire. His weapon cycles once, then seizes. The round in the chamber fires, but the bolt does not move. It is not dirt, it is not neglect, it is tolerance. Dutton understands then that the problem is not individual failure. It is institutional blindness. He tries, briefly, to work within the system. His first proposal is written, careful, measured. He suggests polishing bolt races to reduce friction, adjusting lubrication protocols for cold conditions, minor modifications that do not alter external appearance. He submits it through the company armorer. The response is immediate and final. We don't authorize field alterations. The second attempt is verbal. He speaks to his platoon lieutenant, choosing his words carefully. He suggests controlled modification, testing, data. The lieutenant listens, then shakes his head. That's not how we do things, Corporal. Stick to standard. There is an informal warning afterward, nothing written. Just a look that says consequences exist. That night, rain taps against shelter canvas. Dutton sits on his bunk, rifle stripped across his knees. He wipes oil from his hands and listens to the sound of water finding every weakness. He knows what he is about to do crosses a line. He also knows that if he does nothing, the forest will keep collecting names. He begins anyway, quietly. No witnesses, no records. When he finishes, he reassembles the rifle and works the bolt slowly. It moves like it should have all along. If it fails, the responsibility will be his alone. The work begins the way most forbidden work does in war, quietly after dark, when supervision thins and exhaustion dulls curiosity. On the night of December 2, 1944, at 19:40 hours, Corporal Samuel Dutton sits hunched inside a shallow dugout cut into the western slope of the Hürtgen Forest. The hole was scraped out by an engineer platoon weeks earlier and abandoned when the line shifted. Canvas shelter halves are strung overhead, sagging under collected rainwater that releases itself in irregular drops. Each one lands with a muted slap against the frozen mud. The temperature is falling through 26 degrees Fahrenheit. Dutton's breath fogs the air in front of him, condensing and vanishing in the weak yellow glow of a hooded lantern. He keeps the flame low, turned inward, careful not to let light bleed through the canvas. Somewhere upslope, a generator coughs and then settles. Further off, artillery answers a question no one here asked. The rifle lies stripped across his knees. Externally, it is unchanged. That is deliberate. Regulation stock, parkerized finish rubbed dull by use. Inspector stamps intact. If anyone looks at it in passing, they will see nothing but another infantryman's weapon worn honest by weather and time. What matters is inside. He begins with the bolt. Dutton disassembles it slowly, laying each component on a folded ration carton in the exact order it comes free. He wipes everything down until the steel is bare, then wipes it again. The first pass removes grime. The second removes assumptions. He has learned over years on factory floors that friction hides in places men stop looking. Using a strip of cloth wrapped around a sliver of fine abrasive scavenged from a vehicle maintenance kit, he begins polishing the bolt lugs, not reshaping them, not changing angles. Only easing the microscopic ridges left by hurried machining. He works until his fingers feel the difference more than his eyes can see it. Material removal is measured in thousandths of an inch. Any more would be unforgivable. He moves to the raceways next. These are the surfaces most men never think about, the steel corridors the bolt rides through under pressure. In cold weather, any roughness here becomes resistance. Resistance becomes hesitation. Hesitation becomes death. Each stroke is deliberate. Each pause is longer than the last. He checks his work by reassembling the bolt partially and cycling it by hand, listening to the sound it makes. At first, it whispers. Then gradually it slides. He stops before fatigue makes him careless. That discipline, knowing when to stop, was beaten into him long before the army ever issued him a rifle. Over the next 4 nights, the process repeats. He polishes cam surfaces where the bolt unlocks, reducing the force required to start movement. He inspects the extractor claw under lantern light, ensuring its edge is sharp enough to bite but not brittle. He adjusts the trigger group with the same restraint, smoothing the break until it is clean and predictable, but still within the invisible boundary that separates competence from trouble. Lubrication is the final heresy. Standard issue grease is thick, designed for moderate climates and peacetime assumptions. In the Hürtgen Forest it turns sluggish, then treacherous. Dutton wipes it away completely. In its place he applies a thin, cold-resistant oil, used sparingly only where steel meets steel, nowhere else. When he reassembles the rifle fully for the first time, he cycles the bolt 50 times, then another 50. Then another 20, no hesitation, no binding. The sound is wrong for a service rifle, too smooth, too even. Testing comes quietly. Before dawn, when temperatures bottom out near 18 degrees, he exposes the rifle to open air and lets condensation form on the metal. He waits, then cycles the action with gloved hands. It responds. He loads a single round and fires into soft ground, listening not to the report, but to the bolt's return. He repeats the process until his fingers ache and the light begins to change. By the end of testing, he has put the rifle through more than 120 cycles without a single malfunction. Confidence does not come as relief. It comes as confirmation. Among the enlisted men, the change is noticed. Someone borrows the rifle briefly, cycles it once, and hands it back without comment. Another man says quietly, "That thing's tuned." The name follows naturally after that, Hawk's Tune. No one writes it down. No one says it near officers. The opportunity arrives on December 7, 1944. For 72 hours, German mortar harassment has harried the American positions without settling into a pattern. Shells arrive irregularly, sometimes 2 in quick succession, sometimes none for an hour. The randomness suggests forward observers adjusting fire by eye. Battalion suspects spotters operating ahead of the main line. A patrol is needed, someone to watch, someone expendable enough that paperwork will be light if things go wrong. Dutton volunteers. There is no sniper designation attached to the request, no special authority, just a nod from a platoon sergeant who understands that some men are better suited to stillness than others. Before first light, Dutton moves forward alone. He selects his hide carefully. The burned-out German supply wagon sits just off a narrow spur trail, half sunk into frozen mud. Its oak panels are blackened and cracked, the result of a fire that burned fast and hot. Iron rims are warped. One axle has collapsed inward, creating a natural cavity beneath the wagon's frame. Charred wood absorbs light. Twisted metal breaks outlines. The wagon smells of ash and old grease and something animal that once hauled it. Dutton crawls inside before dawn and settles in. By 6:41, 9 German riflemen move into view. They advance cautiously, spread across roughly 60 yards, boots crunching frost into the loam. Their breath hangs white. They are not rushing. Men who rush here die quickly. 2 of them carry what matters. The first has field glasses slung tight to his chest. The second wears a wire spool at his hip and a folded map case chalked with grease pencil markings. Mortar spotters. If they finish their work, American positions along the forest road, approximately 140 men, will be shelled within 10 to 15 minutes. Dutton has no radio, no fallback. The nearest German is 68 yards away. The farthest is 141 yards, partially obscured by firs. Wind quarters left to right at 6 to 8 miles per hour, inconsistent, curling through trunks and low branches. Visibility opens and closes with the fog. At 6:46, the first spotter kneels. He opens the map case. A compass appears in his gloved hand. He aligns it carefully, deliberate as a man handling glass. Distance, approximately 110 yards. Dutton exhales. The trigger breaks cleanly. The rifle recoils straight back, contained and familiar. The report is swallowed by the forest. The bolt cycles with a muted, mechanical certainty that feels almost indecent. The spotter collapses forward without a sound. For a fraction of a second, nothing happens. Then confusion ripples through the German line. One man shouts, another drops prone. A third turns, scanning the wrong sector of trees. No one looks at the wagon. At 6:48, the second spotter steps into a narrow clearing, wire spool visible against his thigh as he turns to speak. Distance, just under 90 yards. Dutton adjusts for wind, half a degree, no more. The second shot breaks. The rifle answers again. The bolt cycles without resistance. The spotter falls sideways, the wire spool unwinding uselessly into the mud. The Germans scatter. Rifles crack, rounds snap through branches overhead. Bark sprays from a pine trunk inches above the wagon frame. One man fires blindly into the fog. Another runs laterally, trying to locate the source. At 6:51, a rifleman pauses behind a stump, crouched low. Distance, 68 yards. Dutton fires. The man drops backward, legs folding beneath him. At 6:54, another German breaks cover at the far end of the formation. Distance, 141 yards. Dutton tracks him smoothly, leading slightly. The rifle answers. The bolt cycles again. The man stumbles and disappears into the undergrowth, motionless. The engagement lasts 17 minutes. Each shot is followed by the same sequence. Recoil, return, eject, feed, lock. No hesitation, no jam. No moment where Dutton has to think about the machine in his hands. By 07:03, the forest goes quiet. 6 German bodies lie still. 3 more withdraw, dragging confusion and wounded pride with them. The morning after December 7, 1944, arrives without the sound everyone has learned to expect. No distant whistle, no hollow thump, no delayed concussion rolling through the trees. In the Hürtgen Forest, silence is never natural. It is earned and it is temporary. Men wake already braced for impact, bodies conditioned to flinch before the mind catches up. When nothing comes, they lie still longer than usual, listening for proof that the reprieve is real. By 08:30, it is noticed, not announced, not recorded, just noticed. The forward platoons along the forest road, roughly 140 men spread across shallow foxholes and timbered fighting positions, mark the absence the way laborers notice when a machine stops rattling. Something is missing. Something that has been there every day, sometimes every hour. Mortar fire does not resume. At first, the assumption is delay, bad weather, a shift in German priorities. By noon, when still nothing falls, the men begin to look at one another with guarded curiosity. Someone mutters that maybe the observers never made it back. Someone else shrugs and says nothing. There is no formal debrief. Corporal Samuel Dutton reports back to routine duties as if nothing of consequence occurred. His platoon sergeant gives him a single nod, no questions, no follow-up. There is no after-action report with his name attached. No checkbox exists for an artillery strike that never happened. The rifle remains slung over his shoulder, unexamined. Word spreads the way all useful knowledge spreads in war, sideways and quietly. By the second night, men begin altering their habits, not dramatically, not recklessly. They use less grease, they wipe bolts dry before reapplying oil. They polish where they had previously accepted roughness as normal. None of this is written down, no one asks permission. A private who has jammed twice in 3 days reports none the next week. A sentry who once had to kick his bolt open at dawn no longer does. These changes are not uniform. They are inconsistent, imperfect, but measurable. Over a 2-week period, rifle-related stoppages in Dutton's platoon drop by approximately 40 to 55%, depending on how strictly one defines a malfunction. Night watch incidents decrease sharply. Patrol confidence improves in small, almost invisible increments. At battalion level, reports attribute the improvement to enhanced maintenance discipline. No one contradicts this. Officers are not blind, they see results. They also see risk. Official endorsement would require admitting that field alterations occurred without authorization. It would require paperwork, signatures, and accountability that no one is eager to assume in the middle of a grinding winter campaign. The compromise is deliberate ambiguity. Results are tolerated, methods are ignored. Dutton receives no citation, no reprimand, no mention in dispatches. His name does not appear in any commendation tied to the reduction in German mortar accuracy that follows. When his platoon commander looks at the rifle once briefly, he says only, "Keep it clean." That is the closest thing to permission Dutton will ever receive. The Germans adapt, as they always do. By mid-December, mortar observers are pushed further back. Wire is laid with greater caution. Spotters rely more heavily on indirect observation, firing pre-registered coordinates instead of adjusting by eye. Accuracy degrades temporarily. Harassment fire becomes less precise, more wasteful. This too is noted but not attributed. The forest continues to take men. Mines do not care about tuned rifles. Artillery does not care about tolerances. The war grinds on with the indifference of weather. Dutton survives it not because he is extraordinary, but because he refuses to ignore small failures until they become large ones. When spring comes in 1945, it arrives unevenly. Snow recedes from the low ground first, mud deepens before it dries, leaves return reluctantly as if unsure whether the forest deserves them back. Germany collapses in stages, pockets resist, orders contradict one another, then abruptly it is over. Dutton carries no wounds home, no scars that show. He wears campaign ribbons that mean something only to men who were there. He does not speak about the forest on the ship west. He does not speak about it on the train through the Midwest. When he steps off the platform in Toledo, the air smells of lake water and coal smoke, just as it did before everything changed. Midwest Gear and Axle Works rehires him without ceremony. Same floor, same presses, same tolerances. He takes up his place at the bench as if he never left. Steel still behaves the way steel always has. It still binds when cut wrong. It still rewards patience and punishes haste. Younger men ask questions. Older ones nod when he answers. No one calls him Hawk here. He does not keep the rifle. It is turned in, inspected superficially, and absorbed